Hello everyone, welcome back. In this session, we'll learn one of the most fundamental concepts in Python, which is variables and data types. This is the most basic topic in Python and it will help us understand how to store and manipulate data. So let's talk about variables. What are variables? Variables are containers for storing data values. Think of them as labeled boxes where we can store information for later use. Each of these boxes represent a particular type of value which is called the data type, and the data itself, which is the value stored in the boxes. Let's create a variable in Python and understand how they work. First, we'll create a new Python file called variables. We'll right click on the source folder in our project explorer in PyCharm and create a new Python file named variables. Now we'll create a few variables. Let's assume there's a teacher who wants to store the information of a student. He can store them in variables. First, we create a variable name and assign it the value Alice. Alice is written in double quotes as it is of the type string. Next, we'll create a new variable called age with the value 25. The number 25 is an integer and does not need to be in quotes. Similarly, we have our next variable height with the value 5.7, which is 5 feet and 7 inches. This is a variable of type float. Next, we have a variable called isStudent, which has the value true, which means Alice is a student. It is of the type Boolean. It can either be true or false. Now let's print these values and see what happens. To print something in Python, we use the print function. Here is how we can print the values of the variables name, age, height, and isStudent. Now let's run the script to see the results. Here you can see that the values that we assigned to the variables earlier have been printed in the output console. Now let's check if Python has currently identified the data types for the variables we created. We can do this using the type function. So let's print the data type for the variable name, age, height, and isStudent. Now let's run the script once again and see the results. As you can see, Python stored the value of name as string, of age as int or integer, of height as float, and of isStudent as bool or boolean. Here you might have noticed that Python doesn't require explicit data type definition for variables. This means that we don't need to explicitly declare the data type of a variable like int, string, or bool while defining the variable because Python is a dynamically typed language. Python automatically detects the type of data that you assign to a variable. This makes Python simpler and more flexible compared to statically typed languages like Java or C, where we have to declare the type of variables explicitly. For example, in Java, we would have to use the keywords string, int, float, and bool to define our variables. Something like this. String name equals Alice. Int age equals 25. Float height equals 5.7. Bool isStudent equals false. You may ask, what's the benefit of this? The Python interpreter determines the type of the variable at runtime based on the assigned values. This means that a variable can change its type during the program's execution, which is not allowed in statically typed languages like Java and C. The main advantage of this is that it allows rapid prototyping because you don't need to worry about declaring types explicitly. Now that we have seen how to create variables, we will now see some ways to do this more efficiently. First is, Python allows us to assign values to multiple variables in a single line. For example, if we want to assign the same value to multiple variables, let's say A, B, and C should have the same value of 10, then we write A equals B equals C equals 10. Now let's print these values and see the results. So print A, print B, print C. And here you see that all A, B, and C are assigned the same value, 10. Similarly, if we go to our first example and want to define name, age, height, and is student in a single line, we can write name, age, height, is student equals John, 15, 5.10, false. In this example, name should get the value John, age should be 15, height should be 5.10, and is student should be false. Let's print these and see what the output for these four variables are. As you see, all these variables now have the values of John, 15, 5.10, and false. This is how we can define variables of different data types in a single line. You will also notice that the previous values for Alice have now been replaced by those of John. In the last example, we will see how we can easily swap the values of two variables. Let's define two variables A and B in the same line with the values 5 and 10. We will write A, B equals 5, 10. Let's also print these values so that we can compare with the swapped values later. Now, in order to swap the values of A and B without using a temporary variable, we'll write A, B equals B, A. So this will assign the initial value of B, which was 10, to A, and the value of A, which was 5, to B. Let's print these values again and run the script. Here we can see that the values of A and B have been interchanged. We did this without using any temporary variables. Python makes use of a unique feature called tuple unpacking to do this. So, in this session, we learned that variables are essential for storing and using data in our programs. Python supports multiple data types including strings, integers, floats, and booleans. And variables of different types can be declared in a single line in Python. In the next session, we'll explore operators and how to perform calculations with variables. Thank you.